First of all, Raymond, public comments? Okay, no public comments. Number 3, discussion and action on the election of an alternate secretary for the term to run through the regularly scheduled board meeting of February 2013 or the first meeting held thereafter. And this is a result, as you know, Dr. Payan had to resign from the board because he took a job at University of Houston as a visiting professor, and he was our alternate secretary. And we'd like to have 2 in case one of the secretaries is not here. So I'll open the floor for nominations. And in essence, just for Ricardo's information, our alternate secretary just basically fills in when the secretary is not here because all our documents have to be actually, signed and attested to by the secretary to the RMA. So that you don't have to take minutes. You're not going to be responsible for submitting the minutes or anything of that nature. So, any interest? You want to take it?
No. I'm the secretary.
Oh, you're the secretary already? So you can do both. So I have 3 people that can run for alternate secretary. Is Ricardo? No?
I'm left-handed. Nobody can read my.
Okay. Rosario?
Can I nominate myself?
You bet.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. We have a nomination before the board for Rosario Holguin to be alternate secretary, seconded by Susan Melendez. Any further nominations or discussions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Done. Thank you. Congratulations. All right, that's my part of the meeting. Number 4, approval of the minutes of CRRMA board meeting of August the 29th, 2012. Has everybody, 1, read them? And 2, are we prepared to make a motion to accept the minutes as presented? Move. Motion. Second?
Second?
Second by Rosario. Any further comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Done. Thank you.
Abstain.
Abstain? Okay, you weren't here, that is correct. Oh, by the way, welcome. I forgot that. We have, by the way, for the board and the visitors, a new board member, Mr. Ricardo Dominguez. Brings a wealth of experience, having had a long tenure over with the MPO.
Yes, sir.
And so we welcome and look forward to your contributions to the RMA.
I'm very happy to be of service and continue my life's calling, that is to serve wherever I'm needed.
Deal. Thank you. Okay, presentation, discussion, and action on a pilot program approved between the City of El Paso and Secure Origins, Inc. to facilitate cross-border traffic at the Isleta Zaragoza Port of Entry. Raymond, I think we have some speakers.
Yes, sir. Raymond Tiggs, Executive Director of the Community Hour. Today we have with us representatives from Secure Origins, and as noted by the caption of the agenda, there's been a recent partnership developed between the City of El Paso and Secure Origins. So today we have with us Mr. Hector Holguin from Secure Origins, and he's going to set up the presentation for us. If we could have IT bring up the actual presentation as well.
Hector, welcome.
Distinguished board members, my name is Hector Holguin. I'm going to give you a brief historical capsule of the beginning of Secure Origins, which is important. And then I'll have Toby Spoon, our new president, give the presentation that he actually gave to City Council a few weeks ago, and where we received unanimous approval for this project. I will tell you that it's not known now, but by the end of the month, it'll be formally announced that Secure Origins has been acquired by CRRMA. And those of you that know Alan Russell know that we have just the ideal company with a 26-year history in El Paso. To have the ownership of Secure Origins. Secure Origins will continue as a C corporation, Texas-based. But the important is that Allen has a 26-year history with a headquarters in El Paso. That means that all the benefits of what we've been working on will stay here and serve this region. The capsule of the history begins, and I have to acknowledge the fact very proudly that my daughter Rosario joined me in founding Secure Origins. And let's begin in the year 2005, because she single-handedly worked with Senator Elliott Shapley and then Senator Jeffrey Jones of the state of Chihuahua. And they got all the border legislators from both nations to vote for a white paper unanimously that even today represents a significant portion of the solution you're going to be seeing. Then they proceeded forward and took this for approval by all the border governors. And that annual meeting happened in Austin in August of 2006. What's important, the white paper was declared approved, And on the signature page, you have all the border governors. Rick Perry signed, he's still the governor, and we'll be able to use Rick Perry going forward. More importantly, Secretary Janet Napolitano signed. She was then governor of the state of Arizona, and she continues to be a key party in the process going forward here with the Department of Homeland Security. Then that same year, 2006, we put in an application for the Emerging Technology Fund of Texas. And I will tell you, it was a bloody 6-month process. With the first application from Texas, from El Paso, we were competing with hundreds of firms from Austin, Houston, Dallas, and so on. And it took us 6 months to finally get an award. We insisted on a $2 million award, which means that based on a $20 million valuation for our company, no revenue, strictly based on the value of the presentation you're going to be seeing today and the ability to serve the entire border. They gave us a $20 million valuation, which means that the state of Texas owns 11% of our company in the form of warrants. So that's very important going forward, because then we can go ahead and proceed with Chairman of TxDOT, Ted Houghton, who's scheduled to come into our facility. And what is very important, that if it hadn't been for Phil Wilson as Secretary of State helping citizens from El Paso champion this through, we wouldn't have made it. It's not a coincidence all of a sudden Phil Wilson is the Executive Director of TxDOT. So you can see how everything comes together to this moment. And with that, I think I can go ahead and we did get the award in July of 2007, which allowed us to build the operational center that's second to none on the border. We have, you're certainly welcome to come see us. We're just a few blocks from here. And you'll see an operational center that's really state-of-the-art, that covers 1,900 miles of the border of both nations and goes all the way down to Mexico City. So with that, I'll introduce Toby Spoon. I mentioned the acquisition by TCMA. Toby served TCMA for 20 years as Senior Vice President, and he's now the President of Secure Origins. Then I have John Rippey, who's sitting right there, who'll be the Chief Operating Officer. 5 years with TCMA, retired helicopter pilot. I have a wonderful photograph of him in an attack helicopter that I'll show you someday. But anyway, John served in the Vice President of Border Solutions for TCMA, and actually did a major investment in actual transportation logistics. So certainly he's well prepared for this moment. Our Chief Technology Officer is Bob Gray, who's been with me even through Accugraph days. And so with that, I'll go ahead and let Toby give you the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, members of the board, for inviting us to come and share. It's exciting to be part of things that bring good ideas and solutions to the table, and we're just honored to participate in this. Let me see if I can get this.
John, for the record, can you state your name?
Oh, my name is Toby Spoon. Toby Spoon, President of Secure Origins. Sorry about that. Okay. And if you thought I said spoon, it's Spoon, S-P-O-O-N.
Got it.
That's right. And my first initial is T, so it's teaspoon. Okay.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Well, let me see here. All right. First slide kind of shows the border. We're all familiar with it. We live on the border here. But our goal is to build the model border for the 21st century and for El Paso to become the model port of the 21st century. Una frontera de seguridad y prosperidad, a prosperous and secure border. This is the problem that we have. This is the status quo. You can see on peak hours, afternoons, all these trucks jammed up here. In this particular slide, there's about 40 trucks a kilometer behind us. It looks just like this. And you can just imagine all these trucks jammed up there, engines idling, product, trying to get across, waiting for secondary inspections. And there is a program that's the CTPAT program or FAST program in place, but it's not very fast because you have to wait in this line to get through this expedited process. Through our initial efforts, we've been able to do lane segmentation here. You'll see 5 lanes that are designated. The 2 far right lanes are the ones for the CT-PAT certified, and then what we're going to call the Border 21 fast lane. And the people in the empties and regular lane, those people end up getting a 44% rate of secondary inspections. So that just slows the process down. And for a vehicle going through that whole process that gets 2 secondary inspections, it can take up to 4 hours for that truck to get through there.
Toby,
Yes, sir.
can you go back? Explain to me, like, what is TPAT?
CT-PAT is a program that the Customs and Border Protection Group has put in place. It's a counterterrorism program that it was put in place pretty much shortly after 9/11, and a shipper from Mexico is certified, the transportation company has to be certified, and the importer of record has to be certified. So all 3 of those people need to be certified. And in order for the shipper to be certified, there's an electronic barrier that's put around their location, and we can have confidence because of certain procedures that they have in place that have to do with security, fenced off shipping dock area, et cetera, that shipment has a very, very, very high degree of safety of not being contaminated. And then there is, a corridor to get to the border. So CBP theoretically doesn't have to worry as much about those shipments as they do about the ones that are not certified. The problem, as I mentioned, is that they get this certification, but then they get there. Now, industry has taken the approach. I hate to put it in these words. Industry isn't quite as concerned about terrorism. They're concerned about getting their goods to market. And so the benefit to industry is that if this thing works the way it should, then they should be able to sail through Mexican aduanas, U.S. Customs, and from the time they start this kilometer, our goal is for them to get through in about 15 or 20 minutes instead of an average of 76 minutes on a good day, or 3 hours, 4 hours if they've got secondary inspections. In our presentation to City Council, we came with these deliverables. It's a fusion of these 2 things. One is to increase the round trips of trucks from 2 to 3 per day for 250 shipments per day. That's our initial phase, and this is what City Council voted on. Now, 2 to 3 shipments may not sound like much, but that's actually a 30% increase. The impact that this has is that the number of shipments that go out from an operation in Juarez can increase. The trucking companies can reduce the number of trucks that they have to use. The fuel consumption, the maintenance costs, a very important one that we're going to look at a little bit later is safety on the streets of El Paso. These drivers are spending 18 hours a day. They start at 6 in the morning and get home, maybe at 8 or 9. And if we can increase this up to 3 cycles per day, they'll actually be able to get home and have dinner and tuck their kids into bed and not be driving around all worn out on our El Paso streets. We have committed to present bi-weekly data reports. We are open and available, as Hector already mentioned, for any of you all, City Council members, to come down to our offices to see what we do there. And we are generating information on a daily basis. You could call up and ask for a snapshot of what does it look like today, or we can email that to you. But we've committed to do bi-weekly reports. And what we have is a technology-based tracking system. Now,
Excuse me,
yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
What's the address? I'm interested in going by and taking a look.
Okay, 500 West Overland. It's kind of at the intersection of Overland and Paisano. And we'd be happy to just talk with us afterwards, and we'll
Thank you.
give you a tour. It's quite interesting. When you see it for the first time, it's impressive. There's tons of data being generated. I mean, it's just spewing out everywhere. Most trucking companies have GPS units, And so everywhere you look, there's data. But what do we do with this data? How do we make it usable? How do we consolidate it into a usable process? And John introduced a term to me that's called ontology, and it's the whole process of gathering data and making it useful. And that's really what Secure Origins is doing. We're compiling data and putting it in packages that enables industry to make decisions, that gives CBP visibility into Mexico. As of today, their visibility stops at the border. But through this, they actually have visibility on into Mexico. It helps us clean up the traffic jams. It helps make the air cleaner. And this is a win-win-win-win on several fronts. The benefits are a dramatic reduction in wait times for trusted shippers. This is huge. Improved regional market dynamics. As the border becomes truly invisible, as the shipments across the border become predictable, then this becomes a more attractive place for industry. And we are counting on, it literally ends up feeling like they're based in the United States. We're counting on industry coming down and finding this an attractive area by being able to have improved shipment across the border. Improved risk segmentation. If you can go back and imagine that first slide that I put up of all those trucks jammed together and your CBP, how in the world do you decide which of those trucks you're going to inspect? How do you know where the likely candidates are? Well, through this FAST program, we already are saying these guys are trusted shippers. We don't need to invest resources on those guys, and we can funnel resources over to the other candidates. If, as we'll see in this loop, if there's a deviation or an anomaly, we alert the shipper and we alert CBP, and then they know, okay, this truck got off track, so let's inspect that truck. It's not a random choice or selection. Reduced border emissions. Improved traffic safety, as I already mentioned. More efficient processing of cross-border shipments. This is very important. With the unpredictability and trucks going off into secondary inspections, there's a whole chain of events. If a truck, they generally have to plan on leaving around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but if for some reason that gets hung up, then the truck has to be left either in the yard at CBP, or they didn't make it to the overnight shipper in time for that to go out, so that truck has to go and be stored somewhere, pay storage fees. That driver has to go, has to come back. And by reducing that whole element, it just becomes incredibly attractive and efficient. And we want to increase.
I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Again, I'm very interested in everything you're doing. Particularly, my interest also lies in reducing the border emissions. As we know, this area is non-attainment, and I know working with Bob, I'm pretty sure that you've found a way that we can quantify this information.
Yes. And in a subsequent slide, we're going to actually reduce, by participating in this program, we're going to reduce truck emissions at the Zaragoza Port of Entry by 27%. And I'm never going to be able to use the word huge again because Hector uses that all the time when he's describing something. But that's huge. 27% reduction in emissions.
The ports of entry are actually a source of pollution.
Yes.
Great source of pollution. Bora is affecting the neighborhood badly, so
yes.
I welcome your project.
Yes. And by just having it flowing smoothly, we're going to increase traffic, but it's going to be flowing, and so it's going to reduce the emissions from vehicles just idling, like happens with the automobiles on the bridge. Right now, before we started our program, border wait times were 76 minutes. With the lane segmentation that we've begun with just our first baby steps, it's down to 63 minutes, and the model port will get it down to 15 minutes is our goal.
Toby, before you move on the previous slide, there's something in parentheses that says 50 shipment equals break even.
Yes.
For this model program or for the ship?
For this model program, the city of El Paso voted to authorize Mayor Cook to enter an agreement with us and fund $195,000 for 3 months. Okay. So we just wanted to put this up there for city council that that at 50 shipments a day, it breaks even based on those numbers. So it's very attractive, and we already are getting tremendous interest in enrolling in the program.
When does it start?
We're already started. We're wobbling around with our, with what we've got with the lane segmentation, but it's essentially October through December for this city purposes.
When do you think you'll hit your break even?
We already have 47 trucks today that are enrolled. Our goal is to get 100 trucks that will translate into 250 to 300 shipments. So, and that's coming on pretty rapidly.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Spoon, how do you measure the reduced wait times? Where do you start counting the minutes that it takes to get to either 76, 63, or 15? At the bottom of the bridge, or when the line starts on the Juarez?
When it starts on the Juarez side, we've got a kilometer there that we have named the Holguin kilometer, okay, in honor of Hector. But that's actually the place where the lane segmentation starts. There's a four-way stop there, and so from the time they start there, that's when we start counting the time to get all the way through.
Because that's always been a discrepancy with CBP. They always tend to underestimate the time that it takes, and as you know, industry tends to start counting as soon as they start the line, which is always tends to be significantly a longer time.
Well, and what we've done is we've tried to define that, because you could pick any starting point, but a legitimate starting point is kind of entering into, Mexico has designated that kilometer as a fiscal corridor, they call it, essentially a customs corridor. So it's a legitimate place to start that process. Okay. Now, our good friend Bob, with the GPS signals that the trucks are emitting, they emit a signal every 5 minutes, which comes into our command center, and we're able to track the progress of every truck that goes through.
So you'll know when that hits that kilometer?
Yes, sir.
Because I've seen Hector's operation. That's where the alert will go off.
That's right.
And
we actually follow, you'll see this, we actually follow the truck from the time it leaves.
I'm aware of that, but the clock basically starts when they hit that kilometer.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And, I mean, to get through that in 15 minutes is huge. Okay.
Good luck. Any other questions before he moves on?
Well, it's just very important to establish.
It's always been an issue. Wait times have always been an issue, as you know. And
yes.
Great. I'm glad you'll be able to document it with hard-proven data.
Well, and that's the beauty of this, is that we're pulling important data together, and we've already been able to have an influence on CBP because of the data. It's not human beings trying to argue a point or a pet project. When the data speaks, then nobody can say much. And CBP has actually demonstrated a willingness to cooperate. We're fortunate to have David Higgerson as the DFO, and he's been working very closely with Mayor Cook, and we've had good cooperative interaction there. Right. This just kind of shows our increased participation in the Trusted Shipper program. Right now, the enrollment in CTPAT is flat. It's right at 500, and it hasn't gone up because there's no benefit to industry time-wise before this. So CBP is very interested because they want to increase the enrollment over the next 10 years. If we do nothing at all, the industry manufacturing operations in Mexico is going to increase dramatically. And so CBP sees this tidal wave coming, and they have to improve efficiencies to process more vehicles. It will stunt economic growth in the United States of America if we do not solve this problem together. So we're starting off with 250. That's the current model. We want to add over the next 6 months another 250 in the program. By year's end, we expect we're putting a target of 750. We really are seeing dramatic interest, and we expect to exceed this timeline. Increased daily shipments per truck, we're going to go from a current of 2.2 to 3 in less time. And over the bottom right hand here talks about the CBP secondary inspections, which is of interest to industry. For people that are in the highest level of the CTPAT certification, there's 3 levels. they only have a 3% secondary inspection rate, which is almost nothing. And we're in discussions with CBP that anybody that's enrolled in this program gets the tier 3 treatment, okay, that they are only in that 3% category. You can see folks that they're not CTPAT certified that they get 44% secondaries. The aduana, the trusted shipper is 3% as well. This slide points out a very important relationship that we have with the EPA. The EPA is very interested in all along the border in reducing emissions. And up to date, the programs that have been presented just show just tiny little improvements, just minuscule little improvements. And through this, through the studies that Bob's been working with, we can demonstrate a 27% reduction in emissions from the truck emissions on the port of entry. It has major air quality benefits, hazmat monitoring, International Command Center for Emergency Response all out of our Operations Center. And there's funding that's available from the EPA as we can demonstrate and we meet these milestones.
Mr. Chair, Toby, can you explain the International Command Center a little bit more? What does it do?
This slide right here actually talks about that, okay? We've got our Operations Command Center in the center, and this is where we do all the monitoring activity with the participants. The trucks have a GPS unit, and we actually have the capability of putting units inside trailers so that if at 3 o'clock in the morning somebody opens the door and walks in the trailer or motion sensors, so we can tell whether an anomaly occurred there. But the tracking starts from within that electronic fence area. That signal is sent every 5 minutes to our command center, our operations center. And the process starts once the goods are manufactured in the lower left-hand corner, gets loaded on a truck. The truck has a defined route that it must follow. And so we know how much time it should take that truck to get from the plant to the border on that route. Any anomalies, if it's at a stoplight too long, or if it stops too long, it's an alert. If it deviates from the authorized path, it's an alert. We will communicate with the shipper, let them know, and we will communicate with CBP, and they'll know that that truck needs some second revision or second inspection. We are working with CBP, and we're making headway. Mayor Cook is helping us, but we are working on a memorandum of understanding with Homeland Security that will enable us. Right now, if there is an anomaly, the way it stands right now, there's a whole process that takes place, and that truck and driver and everybody is pulled offline until the process is done, and that causes an interruption of flow. But with the Trusted Shipper program, Delphi is not in the business of shipping drugs. And so what we are asking is for self-reporting, and industry is reluctant to make their information available without this assurance that we're asking CBP, go ahead and follow whatever process you need to follow, but don't hold up the shipment. Whatever investigation you need to do, if it's a contaminated load, at least allow the goods to continue on, and don't yank the CTPAT certification for 3 weeks while we do the investigation. That's a very onerous penalty, and so we're asking for an innocent until proven guilty rather than a guilty till proven innocent. We feel that we're going to accomplish that here shortly. So the process goes through. If there are any alerts, the alerts are communicated. We cross the border, gets into the U.S., goods get shipped, and then over on the right side is the reverse. The raw materials come through. If there are any alerts, Mexican aduana is alerted, and the process continues.
Toby?
Yes.
Well, this is the second slide that's not in my packet anyway, so it's like every other slide's missing. I don't know about yours, but yeah, I have it here, but not in the hard copy, so I don't know. Anyway, that's okay, not to worry. You have secure fiber connections on both sides.
Yes, we do.
Who owns that fiber?
TransTelco,
Both sides?
both sides.
And that's where Hector's located, too.
That's where Hector's located. We are on the fiber optic super duper highway. Every bit of fiber optic communication that goes east and west comes through the TransTelco facilities. And what makes this work is fiber optic ring for secure communications. Once we have an alert, we want to make sure that we have secure communications.
Can you define secure communication?
That means non-intercepted and non-interrupted. There's redundancy. For example, if a fiber optic line gets cut somewhere, there's redundancy in the system to be able to use other routes to get the communication to the parties. We want to make sure that, and people ask, well, how can you be sure that it's secure? But it's the same security that we use in our banking relationship, everything that we do on the internet. Some crazy thing could happen theoretically, but there's enough redundancy in the system for rerouting that communication can get to where it needs to get in a secure fashion.
But the secure aspect is not a certification by the feds or anyone else. It's just an industry term, I guess.
I guess it's an industry. I'm going to look to Bob. How do we define secure in that way?
Well, we have a variety of secure protocols. The TransTelco, of course, this is a private network, if you will, so they control.
I've learned that if I don't know, I better get somebody
Good
up that does
idea.
know
Good idea.
for them to talk about it. So.
And state the name, please.
I'm Bob Gray with Secure Origins. TransTelco has this network that they've established, and it's a private fiber network that they extend to their clients in Juarez and in Mexico. And I think the next slide actually shows the extension along the U.S.-Mexico border and into Mexico. But through TransTelco, they provide all of the firewall protection, the specific communications, even encryption, if you will, of data and information that we move back and forth. If you'd like more information on the security aspects of the networks and so forth, I'll be glad to.
No, that's fine. I'm familiar with the industry. I just curious when you said secure, if it was a label that had been put on by the feds, like TPAC, for example, is a registration or a process. These are all industry driven, basically, right? You got your firewall, sonic walls, passwords, and so on, but they're all TransTelco or industry-based.
Yes.
Right? Okay. The reason I ask is, we collect our tolls via wireless communications, and they shift it down to a data center and so on. So, okay.
Hector asked me to mention that AT&T, Verizon, basically all the major carriers all have communications that come through our facility or within our building, if you will.
Right. And now the redundancy is strictly within TransTelco, or do you have another carrier besides TransTelco?
TransTelco is the one that's the primary. They may have some subcontractors, I believe, in some of their networks that extends.
I'm curious to find out who that is, because most people have redundancy, have it with another supplier, because if he goes down, so your entire system is down.
Right.
Okay, thanks. No biggie.
This slide just kind of shows that from anywhere within this fiber optic ring, at most you're 20 minutes away from the Zaragoza Bridge. So it's 20 minutes to the bridge, 15 to 20 minutes through, and then you're on into the U.S. side. This is the slide that Bob was referring to that has the network, the fiber optic network that goes all along the border and down into Mexico. We can track and have secure communications all the way down the manufacturing corridor of Mexico down into the interior. We want to extend our model as we prove it here to other border locations. Upper left is Otay Mesa port of entry. If you look, you see all these little trucks in line waiting to get across. Laredo is the bottom right hand, and the Isleta is the model port of entry. We really want to set the example and show how it's done. And the city of El Paso actually has an interest in forming a nonprofit entity that would then lead and help implement this in other cities up and down the border. And indeed, it'll work on the U.S.-Canadian border as well. Current conditions, you see in the upper right-hand corner, lower left is the model port of entry, the trusted shippers with the lane segmentation. It's just a solution that works. And the response that we got, we were shocked to City Council. City Council was very positive. It's almost like everybody's just been waiting for something that's going to untie this Gordian knot, and Secure Origins is able to come in and help with that. Hector, do you want to come up and make a few comments here?
You can see why I let Toby take over.
Huge.
I will also tell you that Toby, prior to his 20 years with TECMA, was a missionary in Guatemala for 10 years. So his Spanish is better than mine. I mean, his Spanish is perfect. So that certainly is a major asset as we go on the Mexican side of the border. The greatest advantage we have is on the Mexico side of the border with risk segmentation. The slide you see here of Bridge of the Americas is very important because the city of El Paso and CBP have both declared since 9 months ago, and they've been consistent saying they want to move all commercial trucks from Bota, which is Cordova, to Zaragoza. That means that you'll have 2,500 trucks a day instead of 1,500 at Zaragoza. That means that the slide you see there, you're eliminating the pollution in these dense neighborhoods of diesel-based contaminations. You're eliminating 1,000 trucks a day. That is huge, and that 26% probably, is magnified by an order of magnitude. And we're working with Beck and soon with NatBank because of the environmental impact that this has, which is how do you measure health benefits? It's hundreds of millions of dollars of benefits. I wanted to show this slide, and if you, this one, oh, okay. I messed up there. This just emphasized that we looked at your annual report. We know where the investments are. You're hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent, and this just shows that you have some very nice projects up in that feed the Zaragoza region. So we have to prepare ourselves for those 2,500 trucks a day. And as an engineer, I'm telling you, we can double the capacity of Zaragoza with this project. Okay. And again, with just a huge impact on all the contributors. So this just to show that how important this project really is. So from the Cambridge study is I took this from their verbiage to form a system of systems approach for achieving a near-term capability in the El Paso Juarez region for the reduction in wait times and so on. So let's zero in on that. And these are the 2 paragraphs in the Cambridge study that mention secure origins. They spent, thanks to Rosario again, they actually came to our facility twice, and we spent hours talking to them. So we're already under this umbrella of this report with TxDOT, and our job is hopefully to work with you to secure the best plan on how to approach Ted Houghton, for example, and our champion, Phil Wilson, who's Executive Director of TxDOT. Maybe there is a way of doing this together. We did put in I'll let Toby answer the Q&A to wrap up, but we did put together initially a proposal for the city for $10 million, okay, $2 million a year for 5 years, okay, and I think when you think of the impact, if we move all trucks, 2,500 to Zaragoza, there your measurement of $50 billion a year in trade, if that's what it is, and Redco says it's $70 billion. Let's say it's $50 billion of trade between Juarez and El Paso. If we improve that by 10%, okay, that's $5 billion. Texas-Mexico trade is $179 billion, okay, and growing. We improve that by 10%. If we're the core center, we're talking about a huge impact of billions of dollars, or certainly hundreds of millions of dollars. So when we requested a proposal for $10 million, $2 million a year, we knew that we need to prove this first. So we decided to go ahead and resubmit the proposal and set that aside. Let's do these 90 days because we need to benchmark and prove to you, which is prove to the city, and come back and prove to you that we can, in fact, not only achieve but surpass the 250 that goes to 500, that goes to the full capacity of 1,000. Because with those benefits, people won't fight moving from Cordova, from Bridge of the Americas to Saragossa. They'll have the proven benefits to do it because it's the right thing to do, and they dramatically reduce, for trusted shippers, they reduce the flow. What we propose, just so you know, is that if you take 2,500 and we achieve what CBP wants, they want 1,000 trucks a day. They want 1,000 people certified in CT-PAT. Okay, the only way you're going to do that is with this program. So if you give them half the tolls, okay, if 1,000, which is 1,000 of the total 2,500, become CT-PAT certified, and you give them the advantage of paying only half the tolls as an incentive to join CT-PAT and join this model, the city still gets $2 million more a year than they're getting right now. Okay, half the tolls times 1,000 trucks, gives you that total. So when we come back and say, well, we want the $2 million a year, we may rethink that, but I just want to at least benchmark that for you. With that, I'll open up to questions for Toby. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes, I do. What's the schedule once December comes around, pilot program successful? What are the next steps leading to the full implementation of your program?
We're assuming full implementation now. In other words, we're not waiting for something to happen. This money from the city essentially is subsidizing industry for the first 3 months. Kind of, this may be a bad choice of words, but we're kind of training the dogs to jump through the hoops and see what it feels like, to see what faster traffic across the border feels like. And then industry will then enroll, and we're looking at a $250 a month subscription fee, and they can do as many turns as they want. The more turns that they do, we actually believe that they can accomplish 4 turns a day, but we didn't want to overcommit on the goal. But for that money, then the more turns they do, the more they're getting for their money. So we are in full implementation now. We're just going to continue to grow and grow and grow it.
So your system is now in all the ports of entry along the Mexican border?
Only Zaragoza.
Zaragoza.
Only in Zaragoza.
So when does the next, when do all the ports come online?
Well, we want to prove this one first. Hector has already got a meeting lined up in San Diego in December. We've already got some inroads with Tijuana and Otay Mesa port of entry. So that's going to be our next one. But we want to prove the model here first. We're starting to as I say in Spanish, preparar el terreno. We're getting the land ready. I don't want to overcommit. I think within 2 to 3 years, I think we could have all the ports of entry along the border up and running. There's been a whole part of what we've had to do is that there's a lot of political alliance that has to happen. There are so many entities that have had to come together for this to work on both sides of the border. And once we get all this together, then when we go to the other ports, we're going to say, because we don't know the people in Tijuana personally, but what we're going to say is, okay, Tijuana, these are the entities you guys need to kind of come together, and we'll help present information. But you guys, if this is attractive, and we know it will be, then you guys organize those folks together, and then we'll get it implemented.
Okay. Have you made presentations of your program to the Binational Committee for Ports of Entry? I think it's one of those projects that I'm recommending that you do so.
Then I don't believe we have we? The Binational Committee. Okay.
They're meeting on the 23rd, which is too late, but they meet every 6 months. I'm recommending that you take a look so you can get wider exposure other than just this region. And then lastly, have you or anybody else noted the impact on the infrastructures of Juarez and El Paso? Can our new Junior Spaghetti Bowl handle the increased traffic if this program is successful? Have the models proven that? Can we withstand shifting from Bora to Zaragoza?
Northbound, yes. Southbound at Zaragoza, there is As those of you that drive around that loop on Thursday and Friday afternoons see, there's an issue there. The city of El Paso has a plan on the works to actually have a different access way for trucks, not to get caught up in all of the civilian traffic, if you will, to take a different route going into and out of Mexican customs. The city of El Paso is very committed. You know this, I'm sure, but they have declared that this is their most important federally mandated project is to improve traffic on the border. So the city of El Paso is moving as fast as its little legs can carry it to resolve those infrastructure issues.
The MPO together with the NEEP and Ciudad Juarez, they've got there's a model that looks at regional traffic movements. Have you keyed your potential success into the models to see if on the highways in Juarez and the highways in El Paso, can we handle that traffic? Are there going to be points of intersections where we may need to make improvements on either side?
Hector's actually been in a lot of these dialogues before. I'm 3 weeks into this, so you know.
I need to tell you, I'm well grounded in transportation and the flow of goods. Prior to starting Accugraph, I served the largest civil engineering firm in El Paso, which is Cremens, and we did all of Cielo Vista and Airport and Horizon City. We were pumping out 6,000 lots a week. And with that, we have to be extremely well grounded and recognize the importance of new construction and highways, bridges, roadways, infrastructure. This project does not require costly infrastructure, okay? We don't need another bridge, okay? I'm not going to make any comments about the Tornillo Bridge. It's very expensive, $150 million, I think. But anyway, we don't need another bridge if we truly deliver Zaragoza to a model port that it needs to be. The group that you mentioned, I'm pretty sure the mayor sent because he went to Tijuana and got all the mayors, the border mayors, to approve risk segmentation on the Mexico side of the border as their model. So he's already done that. And so I think he proposed that into the group that you mentioned in their last meeting. Very importantly, I don't think the mayor will mind my telling you that he has made a commitment to serve. This is important because you need to understand where our mayor is in all these things. 2 years ago, he was asked by the NCVP Commissioner Alan Burson, I need for you to organize all the border mayors because I can't be jumping around the border. If they're organized, at least I can make maybe 3 visits a year and talk to all of them. The mayor did that very effectively. In the meeting in August in San Diego, this August, we made a presentation to all the border mayors. There were 13 mayors there from the U.S. and 10 from Mexico. In the meeting, they approved that when he finishes office, our mayor will continue to head that organization, be the executive director, pro bono. But Alan Burson is committed to get him funding to institutionalize that organization. He will have staffing, facilities, and a budget to go ahead and continue to serve in that capacity. That means that when I go to Tijuana, Otay Mesa, and San Diego, the mayor's going with me, you know, and maybe not this first meeting in December, but he co-chaired with Carlos Bustamante, who's the mayor of Tijuana, the Border Mayors Organization this past year. Teto Murguia co-chairs it this year. I'll ask Rosada to help me with Teto Murguia if you will allow her to do that. But anyway, the goal is Teto Murguia is committed to work with the mayor. I'm just saying that's very important because it gives us the force to get all the border mayors to help us as we go to each major border region.
It's just that as a transportation planner, you know, I know this program is going to succeed. And so what do we do with that success? At supports of entry, we want to look at improving on ITS functions. First thing we want to do before we put any concrete or asphalt structures. So it seems like this program is going to succeed. So once it does succeed, then how is the corner of DC6 and whatever, how is the corner of I-10 and the loop, will we be able to handle that success? That's my basic question.
Well, I haven't looked at those particular traffic engineering studies. I do know that we've studied the area, the geography right around the Mexico and the U.S. ports of entry, and the key here is flow. The problem and the stress on the infrastructure is just having, on the Mexico side, just having trucks sitting there. As long as there's flow, the group called Promo Front, that's one of the folks that have come to the table, have invested a tremendous amount of money on the Mexico side to build the infrastructure to allow for the truck flow. And at the Zaragoza Bridge, you have a loop that comes around, so along the border, opposite the border highway to get to the Zaragoza Bridge, and north from around the Electrolux plant. So traffic is going to flow, and we've determined that it can handle the traffic, and as it flows going north out of the CBP area, that we've seen that. But if you have any specific studies or specific information that will help us, we want to incorporate that into our plan.
I'll work with Bob.
Okay. You know Bob, so. Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Toby.
Thank you very much. We're
Appreciate it.
grateful for the opportunity. Thank
No action required on this item, right, Raymond?
No, sir.
Thanks, because it's listed for action. All right. Item number 6, discussion and action on a board resolution selecting a toll integrator for the Cesar Chavez Managed Lanes project pursuant to the CRRMA's request for proposals for toll system integration and maintenance issued on August 1st, 2012, and authorizing the executive director to negotiate an agreement for board review and approval. Raymond.
Thank you. As a reminder, the board authorized the issuance of a request for proposals related to the procurement, rather, of a toll systems integrator for Cesar Chavez and the tolling system that the RMA is pursuing. With us today, we have Greg Blake, who is part of our general engineering consultant team, and he's really been spearheading the procurement, which has recently wrapped up, and he's going to have a PowerPoint for you that will identify the procurement process and eventually the recommendation before you today for the selection of an integrator. So with that, Mr. Blake.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Raymond. Greg Blake with the GEC. Like Raymond said, he asked me to come before you today and discuss the recent procurement process we've gone through. So this is going to be for the Loop 375 Cesar Chavez project. This was for the toll systems integration and maintenance contract. Figure this out. I'm just going to do a brief overview of the project, the procurement process, the evaluation process, and then what we're going to do, provide a recommendation to the board. Hopefully you take action today on that recommendation, and then outline the next steps of where we need to go to get the system integrator on board and up and running. Brief project overview. We're talking about Project 12 in the CMP. That's Cesar Chavez Managed Lanes, running from Zaragoza up to US 54, approximately 9 miles long. As you're aware, TxDOT's currently under construction for the roadway project. They're building the 2 general purpose lanes or rebuilding the 2 general purpose lanes in each direction, widening the project out to allow the 5th and 6th lanes to be dropped in, which will be your managed lanes, 1 in each direction. So the contract we're talking about today is for the toll systems that would be put in place to collect your revenue for those managed lanes and operating those managed lanes in the future with a maintenance contract. Back in May at the board meeting, Ron Fagan came before this board and discussed what electronic tolling collection, what the component parts are of that of a system. We're talking about this integrator would come in and design, do the system integration, software development to do all the components Ron discussed, which would be the scanners, the triggers, the cameras, and antennas that collect the AVI tags, and cameras taking license plate images for those that don't have tags. So that's the integrator we're talking about today. That's their scope. The way we wrote this contract was broken out into 2 work segments. Work segment 1 is the system integration portion. So that's the design, the integration, installation, all the testing that occurs. We have factory acceptance testing before a single piece of equipment goes and is implemented in the field. Then we have a first on-site installation where rigorous tests are put in place to make sure the equipment was designed and installed in accordance to the requirements in the contract. And then we go through an operational test with go live on traffic. So that's all encompassed in that segment 1 integration scope, as well as that contractor, the system integrator required for all the traffic control that's required to get in there and install the equipment in that managed lane. All this work is scheduled to occur at the tail end of the when I believe it's J.D. Abrams TxDOT currently has on board doing the roadway construction. This contract would fall on the end of that project. Work segment 2 is the maintenance portion. So the system integrator would have a 10-year contract for maintenance of the system they install. That is a performance-based maintenance contract. It's different than what a typical roadway contract is, where you're out repairing signs and striping and pavement rehab. This is there's performance metrics on the actual system installed. So any piece of the system that doesn't meet a performance metric that's in their contract, this integrator is required to come out, troubleshoot that, and make sure he can either replace or repair the equipment and get the system back up to those performance specs and ensure that we're collecting revenue. Initial term on that is a 5-year term, and then there's a subsequent optional 5-year term after. Just briefly, the process and schedule. There was a PDA between project development agreement between TxDOT and the CRRMA executed back in March that covers this work. I believe Raymond came before you in June to get approval for the procurement process. We issued an RFP in August, and through August and September we had a question and answer period with interested proposers, and then we had one-on-one meetings where we sat down with the proposers, went through the draft agreement, and made sure they understood our criteria or anywhere we needed to modify a technical requirement that they didn't understand, or if there were some discrepancies in those. So those one-on-one meetings were in August. Shortly thereafter, we had proposals due in September 12th. We rolled immediately into an evaluation process that went through October 1st. Finished up last Monday. We had a selection committee that went through the technical proposals and made a final scoring of those on October 1st. And then today, bringing forth the recommendation from that review. 3 proposers responded to the RFP. We had CAPSH with E-Transit as their subcontractor, Telvent with Tri-State Electric, and CRRMA with Code Electric and Apache Barrier and Signs. And talk briefly about the way this contract's written and what how we go through and determine who's going to provide the best value to the RMA. These proposals are scored on 2 factors. One's that technical proposal, and the second is a pricing proposal. The final total proposal score, that FTPS you see, that's how we combine the 2. So we provide a 60% weighting on the technical and a 40% on the price. And the reason for the weighting being weighted more heavily on technical than price, again, this is a long-term relationship you're entering into with a very complex system of computers and components that if they're not running at the accuracy that we've specified, you're losing out on revenue. So it's very important that you enter in with a quality subcontractor. And then the one with the highest FTPS, that's going to be your apparent best value. The technical proposal score, that's on a scale of 100, and this slide just shows you how we split out the different components of the 100 points. We scored 21% on team organization and experience, 21% on approach to project management and design, 33% on approach to system design, development, and implementation, and then 25% on maintenance. And then on the price side, we looked at a price proposal factor. I showed you earlier we're combining technical, which is a 100-point score. To combine that with price, we've got to convert that dollar amount to a point scale. So here what we do is we divide the proposal score into the lowest proposal score to normalize those prices and able to add them to the technical to come up with that final total proposal score. And earlier I discussed there's 2 segments of work, the system integration and the maintenance. So in this case, we asked for two prices, one for system integration piece and one for that maintenance piece. So those two are combined to get that total proposal price. The evaluation team is made up of pass-fail advisors, a technical evaluation team, and then the RMA who will make the final selection. Pass-fail advisors, that was Brian O'Reilly with Locklord, outside counsel, and then myself with the GEC. And our role is essentially to, as those proposals are received, to go through them and make sure that all the mandatory requirements and forms are filled out and provided with the proposals. The technical evaluation team that's comprised of a selection committee and a technical panel. And those folks are the actual ones that review and detail the technical proposals and score each criteria point that we laid out in the contract versus the technical solution provided in the proposal on a qualitative basis. That's all established in the RFP. So on that selection committee, we're looking for folks from the industry. One of the things we set out to do is look for folks within Texas that were familiar with the interoperability standards within Texas and the integrators that have played in that market. So we had Clayton Howell from NTTA. He's the Assistant Executive Director of Operations. We had Tim Riley from CRRMA. He's the Director of Operations for their program. And then Roberto Macias from TTI. He's an Associate Research Engineer for their toll systems group. And these guys actually, they spend a lot of time. That's quite a chore to go through these technical proposals and the timeline we outlined. So they did a lot of work and they did a good job. So if you run into them, give them some thanks. The technical panel, we had Ron Fagan, Sam Souls, Julie Dillard, and Alan Beck. These folks, again, they also reviewed the technical proposals in detail. They didn't actually do the physical scoring. They provided input to that selection panel where if that committee, if they had portions of a proposal where they couldn't find a specific criteria was addressed, these folks, they could reach out to them and look if they had seen the solution somewhere else in the proposal, or if they didn't understand a certain criteria, they could talk to these folks as a resource. Then on to the RMA, Executive Director Raymond, he acted as our point of contact for all the proposers. During the Q&A, as they provided questions, those routed through Raymond, and then Raymond distributed those out to the technical team to get responses. So essentially acting as a firewall. We didn't want proposers talking to the selection committee. Also during the evaluation, going the other direction, if we had any clarification requests, those all routed through Raymond. And then the board of directors, you're going to consider the recommendation brought forth today. So on to the results. Like I said, we had three proposed. We had Capsch, Telvent, and Chermy there on the left side there. The first column, you'll see their technical proposal score. Now those, if you look at those and compare them to, say, a school grade that the child might bring home, that looks kind of low. But it warrants some discussion on how we actually go through a qualitative process and convert that to points. In this case, we had a rating from exceeds down to failure and graded in between. The midpoint was meets, and what that's describing is are you meeting the criteria set forth in the RFP? Are you exceeding it, or are you weak, or are you a failure on that criteria? And so that meets criteria was given half points for each criteria in the RFP. So that's why you see these are kind of clustered around that 50% standpoint. We don't want to give any points to someone that provides a really well-presented proposal that doesn't provide any additional benefit to the RMA. And so that's why you see we're kind of clustered around that 50%. Then the price proposal factors in the next column. And again, you see one providing the lowest price was at 100%. And then the final total is the combination with that 60-40 split discussed earlier. And so the rankings on the far right with Telvent at number 1. And in this case, Telvent, with the number 1 ranking, has the highest technical score, actually had the lowest system integration price and the lowest maintenance price. And here are some details on Telvent's proposal. Again, there's your technical score. Integration price of $2.8 million and a maintenance price that first 5-year term just under $950,000. So next steps, the board will consider this recommendation as the best value for this RFP. After that, we'll finalize the contract with the selected vendor. The project development agreement with TxDOT requires any tolling facility contract that you want to enter into be reviewed and approved by them prior to that execution of the contract. So we've actually provided that contract to TxDOT. It's currently under review. Then I believe CRRMA will come back and ask for the board to execute the contract after that. And then there'll be a notice to proceed to get the contractor on board. Any questions?
I have a question.
No.
Let me, Raymond, are we supposed to take action on this today?
Yes, sir. The recommendation is that,
I saw the recommendation, but you know what? Right now, I don't know who these firms are. We don't really have a clue. One, you recommend, you give me the final price of $2,200,000 and change, but I have no clue what the others bid. There's really no data. Are we supposed to just basically blindly take the recommendation from our evaluation process and just accept it? Is that basically it? Is that what I'm hearing?
I wouldn't characterize it as blindly taking the recommendation. I think there was a good amount of information provided in the PowerPoint. I mean, the reason why the RMA utilizes these evaluation teams and the panels is to insulate the board from heavy involvement within the procurement process.
Right.
So it's set up like this for a reason. So,
and again, I don't want to get into the procurement process, but we're appointed to this by duly elected representatives, and the constant flack on this particular body has been that since we're not elected, we don't represent anybody. But if a council or the mayor asks me, well, who else bid, or who are the people that bid? I have no clue except the name. And two, well, how does this price that seemed to be 100%, by the way, right? They've got 100% on their pricing.
Right.
How does it relate to the others?
Right.
And what was the rationale besides the one here? There's really, we don't have a lot of data.
I'm not sure what you're asking for. I mean, you received the scores of each of the parties.
Right.
I think that Greg can share with you some history or some information on each of the companies if that's what you're looking for.
Well, that would have been good, and also seeing the other pricing, seeing the other technical. The technical proposals obviously are very subjective, and you had pros but pricing I can relate to.
Yeah, I guess first I'll capture the pricing. Okay. You pointed out Telvent 100% on the price proposal factor. What that's telling you is the way we had to normalize those prices. We took, I'm not going to flip back to the formula, but essentially the lowest total price became a nominator in a formula. Each other proposal's price was divided into that. So if you look at these scores here, 58% and 54% from CAPS and CRRMA, what that's telling you is their total weighted price, system integration and maintenance, they were almost double what Telvent's price is. Okay, so that gives you an idea of where they were in the numbers. On the technical side, you mentioned it being subjective. I don't like to use that term. The RFP for this contract is fairly comprehensive with a very large volume of technical requirements. And so these technical solutions that were provided were scored against those technical requirements. And like I said, we're very careful not to provide scores above meeting the criteria by someone that didn't just commit to meeting the criteria and then provide some flowery words to describe their process. That's definitely not the intent, and that's not what was done. You can see that reflected in the scores here. To talk a little bit about the companies, CAPS is a very old company going back into Europe. A lot of overseas experience in Poland and Germany in tolling. They've got a little bit of a foothold in the Northeast with a few projects, and they just secured some work in the North Dallas region with LBJ and I-35 with Centra for those PPPs up there. Telvent, a little history on them. They're actually a Schneider Electric company. It used to be Caseta. Telvent currently is the system integrator for CRRMA, all their operations, for NetRMA, for the roads that are coming online here next year, and then for CRRMA down in the valley in Brownsville. So very extensive experience with RMAs in Texas, very familiar with Texas interoperability standards. CRRMA, I think you guys are probably aware of them. They're here in town. They're the integrator that operate your bridges. They don't have a lot of open road tolling, which is what you're doing with managed lanes. You're not stopping people. But they came up with a pretty good proposal if you look at their technical proposals for. They also have done some bridges in other areas outside El Paso and a couple toll roads on the East Coast.
Okay. Yeah. Were there any conflict of interest, since obviously you had people from other RMAs sitting on the evaluation panel? And
No, we had
people have done work for some of the RMAs.
Right. So we had the standard non-disclosure signature by each of the parties that are involved in the selection process.
Well,
Mr. Donme, if I could also kind of follow up on that, then this process is outlined and as utilized in this particular procurement is the exact same process that we utilized for selecting the Americas Gateway Builders at the Americas Interchange, as well as every other procurement that we've done to date. So the way that we're presenting it to you is identical to those prior procurements. So if we're interested in reviewing our process, we can certainly do that. But this process followed the established process that we've established over the years.
But I thought, and again, I don't want to argue here, and I don't want to get into it, but I thought we had, because of the issues we had with a couple of procurements, we had decided that we would at least get a little bit more detail than just blindly accepting, which is what we've done, okay? Every contract we've done, basically recommendations come forward, and we pretty well rubber stamped it and approved it and moved on. And again, I can understand that because we're not experts in transportation, if you will, and how to pour concrete and whatnot. But to me, it seems like we're being asked to take a quantum leap based on very little information.
Well, if I could ask you to clarify or specifically request the information, we can provide it to you.
I'd like to have seen the pricing, exactly, okay? And then maybe the formulas that were used. I'm not to question, but to understand. If somebody was to come to me and said, you just awarded a $2 million plus contract to Telvent, who up until now, I had no clue who they were, okay? And they said, who is it? Good question. What did they win? Well, our evaluators came back and graded them number one. Based on what? Well, this model. But did you see any of those numbers? No. Okay. Were you aware of those? No. You see what I'm saying? So I don't know what we're supposed to do.
Okay.
Go ahead. Let me. I'll let the rest of the panel speak their mind.
Sure.
Well, thank you for explaining a little bit of background of each company. I thought that was really essential because my first impression was I've never seen those companies before. When the systems integrators first came up, those companies right now did not mesh with the names that I first saw several months ago. And maybe it's memory loss, but I do not recognize those names from the initial list when we were talking about what systems integrators we were potentially going to reach out to that were for the bid.
If
I
may.
I could be wrong, but I just did not recognize those names.
These, if you're referring to the presentation by Ron Fagan in May to the board, right. All three of these were
several months ago when we first talked about what systems integrators could potentially be involved in this project for the RFP.
The one we probably didn't have on that list would be CAPS. We didn't think CAPS would come over and try to propose on it.
CRRMA is maybe the only one that looks a little bit familiar, but the others do not.
Telvent was definitely on that list. We knew they were interested. In fact, I think Telvent, starting back in 2009, maybe earlier, Raymond, but they've been talking to Raymond about y'all's system going back quite some time. So they've shown an interest in this RMA from day one, essentially.
That's true.
And I totally respect the process that has been undertaken and all of the detailed work and all of the effort. But I would appreciate, as the chairman has expressed, just a little bit of background here and a little bit more detail.
And if I could ask you specifically, what information were we missing in our PowerPoint? And we can provide it. I think Greg's here. He's knee deep in this thing from day one. Tell us what you'd like to know, and we can obviously future procurements will be a little bit more apprehensive of your concerns, and we'll address that within the PowerPoints. But if you'll tell Greg what you'd like to know, I'm fairly certain Greg could probably either answer it or we could together answer it for you.
One is, the companies, who the companies are, as you just did, the strengths of each company.
I can go into that a little bit. I mean, I'll dwell on Telvent since that's the one that's in front of you as a selection. You'll notice they're slightly above that 50% mark on their technical proposal. One of the big benefits they brought through their technical solution and their teaming arrangement, they got some good points in their teaming arrangement. I don't know if you noticed, but Tri-State was their subcontractor. One thing that's a stretch typically for system integrators is to go out physically in the field and do traffic control. That's just not their bailiwick. They do computer systems, they do installation, they do maintenance on those component parts, but they're not big into traffic control. And as an entity that's dropping in a managed lane adjacent to two general purpose lanes they're going to be operating, that was a large concern of ours in this procurement. Telvent brought Tri-State Electric, who's currently doing traffic control operations for the current roadway contractor. And so that kind of solved two problems. There's a seamless transition, taking over care, custody, and control of that traffic control between the roadway contractor TxDOT has under contract, and then switching over to Telvent, who's got the same subcontractor on board. As well as in their technical solution, the Tri-State is going to be doing a lot of the variable message. We've got a time-of-day pricing on this managed lane, and so we have a lot of digital signs that are going installed by Abrams through TxDOT's contract. Tri-State Electric's installing those for Abrams, and then when they're brought on through Telvent, they have to make those signs play with the system integration that they're doing for the toll system. So there's going to be another seamless transition there between the roadway contractor and the system integrator to make sure those signs work properly and talk with the toll system that's being installed. So they showed a really good teaming arrangement with a local subcontractor that's very familiar with this area, very familiar with the project specifically, and currently already involved in the project. I think I already touched on Telvent's current role with the other RMAs in Texas. With CRRMA, they've been working with them with their system integration and their tolling system since 2005. Again, the new RMA up in Northeast Texas, NetRMA, they're providing the systems for that roadway. And then down with CRRMA, they're the integrator down there. So really out of these three, Telvent's the only one that has worked with RMAs in Texas and currently is tied into the interoperable hub within Texas. And interoperability with your toll systems is very important. And if you remember back to Ron's discussion, you're going to have AVI tags in these cars that are driving on your managed lanes. And so the way you get your tolls is those transactions go through the interoperable hub at Texas. So that's usually a lot of software development that occurs to tie into that hub and make sure those transactions occur properly. Telvent's got that system up and running. It's proven, it's reliable, and it exists today. So that was another plus on their side.
How do they address people that don't pay? How do we identify those people, and how do we?
Right. So So that gets back to that previous presentation by Ron. But we've got what you're striving for is to get a large portion of the market that's going to drive on the road, a large portion of those customers with toll tags. For those that don't choose to have toll tags, you're going to be capturing an image of their license plate every time they drive through. So this system triggers those cameras. They get an image of that license plate, and you go through the toll bill process. For those that choose not to pay that toll bill, you go through a violation process. And so that's a process of getting the courts on board here in town and going through and tagging on admin fees as you go through that process. And eventually you'd have a court packet that goes to the courts, and you get a court order for that payment. One of the issues here on the border, though, is going to be your Mexican plates and not having an address to send those toll bills to. That's kind of a separate issue from the actual system integrator. That's something Raymond and us have been talking about. One of the solutions we're talking about is automated license plate readers that are mobile. You can put them in a police car, or you can put them at the border. One of the things that does for you is as you get a history of this managed lane operating, you can establish a database of those people that are habitual violators. Those APLR units will pick up on that tag, that license plate tag, and notify you that, hey, this is one of the habitual violators. So you can either choose to pull them over with police enforcement, or you can pull them over at the border where they're already stopped and physically hand them a bill, or pursue other means or enforcement actions with that person at that time. But what you're trying to do is convert folks to know it's a managed lane, it provides benefits to them, and convert them into a customer eventually. But that's something we're definitely working on with Raymond, kind of separate from the integration piece.
Right, and I think that's the bigger point. The answer to the question of what are they doing with violators is nothing. The integrator simply records who's using the facility and then gets that information to us. In terms of what happens with those, that follows in a separate process referred to generally as the back office services. So again, in terms of your question specifically, what do they do with violators? Nothing.
How the technology is going to get that information, and then how we use it.
Right, and did you want to get into what Telvent's proposed solution was in terms of capturing that data?
Yeah, actually, I was going to come back to that, because remember when we initially started our toll project, some of the counts were either over or under because they had to do with technology, and the readers were not capturing the plates. We initially, I think we straightened them out, but there were some. So what improvements in technology is Telvent proposing, and is it fiber? Is it our active RFD, passive RFD? How is it getting from there? I don't have the damn presentation in front of me, but it goes from the highway to the server, I believe, if I looked at your presentation correctly, and then from there it goes someplace else. Right?
Do you want to outline what the RFP required, and then what the response?
Yeah, remember, we didn't see any of this. Okay?
Right. So let me address the accuracy issues, because that is a key issue with a system integration contract. So instead of being prescriptive in this case, this contract was performance based. So if you're looking at vehicle detection, so the first step in a toll is to actually know that there's a vehicle in your toll zone. So in this contract, we have a 99.96% accuracy requirement on that integrator. So what that translates to, he can have 4 errors in 10,000 vehicles. Okay, so it's fairly high, but that's the industry standard with what's been going on with the RMAs across Texas. So that's the first key. And then AVI reads, that's for the folks that have the tags. Again, that's a 4 in 10,000 error rate that we have in the contract that they're held to. On image capture, that would get more to your question about license plates. That's a 99.8% requirement threshold, so that's 20 in 10,000. That would be the leakage on that. That would be acceptable. To talk about the technology there, like I said, it's not prescriptive, but what the solutions are is right now TxDOT's building the infrastructure, so they're hanging 2 gantries at each toll point. What Telvent will do, what they have in their proposal are cameras that will capture front and rear license plates as a vehicle drives through, is detected. Once they know it's there, it'll take those capture those images of the license plates. At the same time, look for an AVI tag. If there is no AVI tag, or if there's a bad AVI account, that image gets retained, and that gets transferred to the back office Raymond was referred to, at which point we either do pay by mail first. If that doesn't work, that's when we kick into the court packet process. So there's a whole chain of events that start in motion by what these guys are installing in the lanes.
Questions?
Mr. Chair, looking at the problem of trucks that are not registered in this area or the United States, don't we have a data set? Isn't there a data set available in Juarez where those trucks are registered to someone, and could we not get that information and put it on our data information, so we have an address tied to a license plate?
Yeah, I don't. You're asking specifically about commercial trucks.
Commercial trucks,
I don't think they're going to be your problem. I mean, commercial trucks are, as like you said, most of them are either tied to a business or they're tied. I don't know if they're tied to individuals in El Paso or in Mexico, but I know they're tied usually to a business. You can get that database and you can track those companies or those individuals down fairly easily. The issue is going to be your public or your non-commercial vehicles. Those, from my understanding of the issue, those tags aren't. We can't get a mailing address for those tags. They're not tied to a mailing address. They're tied to an individual. So we're going to have to establish ourselves a database of what tags are violators. Have that database available to us so that we can do selective enforcement on this side of the border. That's looking like the best solution at this time. But Raymond's planned a trip down to CRRMA. They've got a similar situation down in that area with an operating toll road near the border with international crossings. So we're going to see what data set they have, what they've been collecting since they've been operating, and what solutions are they pursuing at this time, so we can maybe leverage the two.
And then Lastly, perhaps the board can send information to our executive director as to what we want to see and contain in any future packets. From my point, I'm operating even blinder than everybody else because I didn't have the attachment on mine, so I'm just having to listen and make a decision, and they make an uninformed decision.
So,
but
we all have the same thing, one piece of paper.
okay, because I also do have the responsibility that I failed, and that was to look at this agenda beforehand and then call Ray, but I wasn't smart enough to do that. That was my own condition. But nonetheless, future ones, we should see improvements. Any concerns that we have, future discussions on any of the contracts will be better.
Well, if I could, Chairman, or Vice Chairman rather, I'm hearing a great deal of concern, and again, we're following the model that you all had established over the years. So if this model doesn't work anymore, we can certainly address that in the future. But specifically on this one, because this is an important procurement, and you're going to be utilizing this team for years, if you're really not comfortable with this, then we can certainly delete it. We can either call a special meeting where I would ask that each of you send me points that you want us to delve into, and we can have a special meeting where we can sit down and go through those points. And we can deal with this particular procurement in that manner if you're so interested. Beyond that, we can use that also as a template for future procurements. But again, this is the information. In fact, I thought we were providing more. We are providing, actually, let me rephrase that. We are providing more information than we did on the $108 million procurement that you did for the Americas interchange. So I thought this is what you needed to make this decision. But if it's not, in terms of timeline, I think we're comfortable. We can delay this for a bit, maybe have a special meeting within 2 weeks or something like that. Is there anything that you can think of in terms of timeline, Greg, that would require quicker action?
No, that'd be acceptable. I mean, it still fits.
Mr. Chair.
I will tell you that I'm personally comfortable with the process. This is the purpose of us having a partner with the GEC to be able to evaluate these proposals independently from the board. But maybe what we do need is more information to have that comfort level. But I think the process and having an independent party really do that with many layers of review from other individuals, to me, it gives me a lot more comfort than just having us here discuss that. I'm sorry, just put that on. So I think if we want to change that process, we really need to think long and hard about that. Maybe it's just a matter of presentation and more information versus trying to change the whole process that we've really relied on. And for me, it's that independence is important.
Mr. Chair, I share your views, and I think the process is pretty solid, but it's just the information getting, in particular to me, I'll speak on my behalf. And I would move to delete and perhaps have a special meeting, and then before the special meeting, have that information. I know it's going to be hard to do, but have that information to us before the meeting so we can go to the meeting better prepared to make a decision.
Yeah, and again, Raymond, I personally, I don't have a problem with the process because we don't want to get bogged down to it and we want to insulate ourselves. I'm more interested in, and he went into it a little bit right now, the rationale. Why Talbot? Well, because they're doing this locally with TxDOT. They're doing something with Abrams. What is that? I mean, these are factors, and beyond the hard numbers, there was some subjective criteria in there, and there was some justification for, or what was their thinking? You know what I'm saying? And we don't know any of that. Right now, as I said, if we were to be asked questions about this, very few of us could actually explain any of it. So what I'm thinking, and then, we need more information as to how the process or how the committee or whatever you want to call it, came to this conclusion beyond this one slide. And then two, how can we evaluate the process if it's working for us or not if we don't know enough about it? And because I think we're going to have to look at the process as far as what we get back in the form of a recommendation, not pre-do it, okay? Because I don't want to get into this minutia, but I would like, before I can make a commitment to spending anything, and I've learned, had I known what I know now, I probably would have asked those questions when we did the $108 million project the first time around. But we've learned that we've tripped along the way on some of our procurements. So all I'm asking is a little bit more substance behind these numbers, what was the justification for these numbers or the rationale for these numbers and the eventual recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I'm asking for. And I'd be in favor of deleting it and having a meeting later just on this topic.
Okay, then what we'll do then is I'll develop an outline in terms of what the GEC will come down and present to you all.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll circulate it to each of you and ask for each of you to provide responses to that outline, whether we're missing something or there's something in there you don't want to know about or something like that, and hopefully that'll get us there. And we'll call a special meeting then, hopefully within 2 weeks, if not sooner. I'll work with each of you to work on your calendar to get this scheduled as quickly as possible so we can get you all comfortable and hopefully take action at this next special meeting.
Okay.
I'm like Susan. I don't think we want to change the process. I think what you did on your expounding at the end, where you went into more of the, I should say, non-scoring criteria, is very helpful. I don't think we should change the process, but I think we learned something today when you're giving the presentation, go into some of the touchy-feely things that really make a big difference. Besides just the scoring, I think it's very, very, very helpful.
Okay.
Let me ask, with one last ditch effort, is there a possibility of Greg providing some more of that information to you today, or would you just prefer a separate meeting?
Well, we're going on 10:30 already, and I'd actually would just like to focus on this, so at a special meeting would work, unless we're backed up against the wall and have to take action today.
No, I think you heard from Greg. There's not a ticking.
Because I'm not prepared
timeline on
to vote in favor of this at this point.
Mr. Chair, I did make a motion to delete and come back.
You did?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second?
Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose?
No.
Okay. 3, 4 ayes, 1 no. Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on this, Raymond?
No, sir.
Okay. Number 7, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a First Amendment to Project Development Agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation dated March 7th, 2012, regarding the Cesar Chavez Managed Lanes projects. Raymond.
Okay. As a reminder, and in fact this was brought up during the prior item number 6, in order to pursue the development of the Cesar Chavez project, we entered into a project development agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation. And within that project development agreement was really the outlining of the responsibilities between TxDOT and the RMA for the development of the project. Included in there specifically was the authorization for the RMA to secure a systems integrator and maintenance contract. And it really outlined the responsibilities of the RMA in terms of how we implemented that system. Included explicitly within that project development agreement was an Exhibit D that is referred to as the title, as the interface control document. And that's really a very, very detailed, I think it's a 100-page document that really outlines the way that TxDOT's integration systems work. And really what TxDOT was requiring of us was to match that interface control document. It was very detailed, overly so, and in terms of when the RMA began looking at bringing on its own integrator, we really spent a great deal of time looking at the interface control document and realized that it was entirely too detailed. It basically required us to go in one direction, whereas that would have defeated the purpose of an open procurement to seek the best value for the RMA. So when we broached that issue with TxDOT, they agreed and have agreed to this amendment, which essentially removes that interface control document and instead replaces it with a paragraph, and you've seen in your backup, replaces it with a paragraph that generally refers to the RMA or requires the RMA to comply with statewide interoperability standards adopted by TxDOT. So we get to the same point where interoperability is still in place, but it removes the overly detailed requirements of the interface control document.
Okay. Comments?
Make a motion.
Motion, second?
A second.
Second by Susan. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, done. Thank you. Raymond, you asked that we delete item number 8?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to delete item number 8? Moved by Susan, second?
Second.
Okay, second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, done. Thank you. Item number 9, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute an engagement letter with Clifton Larson Allen LLP for the fiscal year 2012 annual audit. Raymond.
Yes, sir. As you know, the RMA went out with a public procurement for an annual auditing firm. I believe it was in 2011, and the law firm, or I'm sorry, the CPA firm of Clifton Larson Allen won that procurement, and they provided our annual audit for fiscal year 11. Now, 1 year later, we're looking for another audit of an audit of fiscal year 12. So before you is the engagement letter, and I'm requesting authorization to execute this agreement for this past year.
Comments?
Any changes from last?
Yeah, actually, yes. I'm glad you mentioned that. I meant to mention that. There is Gatsby Rule 60, a new rule that applies specifically to entities like the RMA that applies in our case. So we're actually under different regulations for this particular audit. And in fact, it's a good thing because Gatsby 60 deals with agencies like ours that don't have assets, that truly don't have assets, but have all of these existing debts. So it ties it in, and our report this year will look much more accurate than years past.
With that, I'd make a motion.
Motion made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, done. Thank you. All right. We can relate to that one. Discussion and action on a board resolution ratifying the submittal of a request for financial assistance to the Texas Department of Transportation for preliminary engineering and environmental services for the I-10 Managed Lanes project and authorizing the submittal of any related documentation as necessary. Raymond.
Yes, sir. So, as you know, the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan tasked the Camino Real RMA with pursuing what was referred to then and still is the Southern Relief Route, which is really the proposed toll facilities that start or that really go from Loop 375 on the east side to Loop 375 on the west side. And the point of the CMP was really for the RMA to develop different approaches to pursue each of these projects. As you know, going from the east over to the west, we are pursuing the preliminary engineering and environmental for the I-10 Managed Lanes project. The next project in that Southern Relief Route corridor is the Chavez Managed Lanes project, which, as you know, is moving forward. The next segment then is the downtown part, which is Border Highway West, which TxDOT is pursuing the environmental approvals for that now. Then the final segment is from essentially Racetrack or Sunland Park area, Sunland Park Drive interchange. From that area, heading west to either Trans Mountain or eventually I-10. That's that last segment. So what you see before you is the request for financial assistance for a toll facility, the application that the RMA submitted on September 18th of 2012. And really what we're doing in that application is requesting $2.7 million from TxDOT to develop the preliminary engineering and the environmental phases of that project as well. Just like we're doing for the Americas Managed Lanes on the east side, we're doing the same. We are looking for funds to do the same for the west side portion, which is, as you will have noted from the backup, and in fact, there was a map included specifically in your backup that shows the connection from Racetrack up to Trans Mountain, and then eventually from Trans Mountain up to I-10. Now, a bit of history as well. The Comprehensive Mobility Plan, in terms of this particular project, envisioned only the connection from Racetrack to Trans Mountain on the west side. In discussion with the district, with the El Paso district of TxDOT, they've asked us to extend the project limits out from Trans Mountain all the way to the New Mexico state line in this study. That doesn't mean that we're going to develop toll facilities for that. It just means that they will be studied. So the study area has increased by several miles. So the $2.7 million incorporated into this request for funding includes both segments from Racetrack to Trans Mountain, as well as Trans Mountain up to the state line. And subject to your questions, I think that you've seen the application. Actually, one other bit of history as well, and as was mentioned in the caption, actually it wasn't mentioned in the caption, but back in 2007, I believe it was, the RMA board authorized the chairman and the treasurer to submit these applications on a periodic basis. And the thinking was there's no commitment of the RMA when you submit these applications. It's simply these application processes are very long and drawn out. They require, by way of example, 2 readings at the Texas Transportation Commission, and before that, there's at least 30 days of review from TxDOT staff. So the thinking at the time was, if the board authorized the chairman and the treasurer, each individually, to submit an application like this on behalf of the RMA, but the resolution granting that authorization also requires the items to be brought to the next available board meeting. So that's what you have here today. The application has been submitted, so that's why you see the caption reading as a ratification of an application that has already been submitted.
Questions? Do I hear a motion to?
Move to approve.
Moved. Second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign, done. Thank you. All right. Number 11. Discussion and action on a board resolution regarding the adoption of the CRRMA legislative priorities for the 83rd Texas legislative session. Raymond.
Okay, as you know, the Texas legislature is preparing to begin their 83rd legislative session in January. And in preparation for that, the RMA, the staffs of each of the various RMAs, excuse me, we meet periodically, or rather by phone on occasion. We met for this particular project. Excuse me. We met by phone, and each of the RMAs identified the various priorities that they were looking at, and we collectively went through each of our priorities. What you see before you then is a list of 5 priorities, which somewhat follow the priorities that we adopted for the last legislative session. Excuse me. Specifically, what the RMA is looking to support in this next legislative session, it's the 5 items, and they are toll enforcement remedies. And what we're looking for there are additional remedies. By way of example, we could pursue vehicle registration renewal blocks for habitual violators, and that's by way of example, the city of El Paso recently adopted a program where if you are a red light camera violator, then the county will not renew your vehicle registration until you pay down that red light registration fee. So that's, by way of example, that's one way to do this sort of thing. We're looking at enhanced penalties for habitual toll violators. And I should mention on this particular priority, we're actually the beneficiary of all the other RMAs, but also the tolling entities such as HECTRA out of Houston and NTTA out of Dallas. Their entities have been in operation much longer. They've got existing systems, and more importantly, they have lists of habitual violators. So they already have this problem. They're trying to deal with it. We will benefit by what they're doing. So that's one priority that's being proposed. Second one is support of a revolving fund. As you may recall, last legislative session there were various priorities brought forth that would have developed a new revolving fund for transportation projects. So we would be supportive of a new fund like that. That's what item 2 is. Item 3 is additional work on transportation reinvestment zone statutes. As we are the first region to implement a TRZ and issue debt on a TRZ, and beyond that, we're looking to develop additional TRZs in the county of El Paso. As we implement these TRZs, we're encountering some issues in terms of how they work, how to amend them, and that sort of thing. So we'll be supportive of likely Representative Pickett as he moves forward to develop additional tweaks to the TRZ statutes to make them more useful. So that's number 3. Number 4 is always on our legislative priorities list, which is increased transportation funding, of course. And 5th, this one requires a little bit of history. If you recall from the last legislative session, concession CDAs, concession comprehensive development agreements, the way that the legislature dealt with them last session was to say, if a region wants to pursue a concession CDA, that specific project must be identified and approved within legislation to be pursued by that region. So what we have here is number 5 is kind of a general provision that says if the delegation, if our El Paso delegation is supportive of a concession, a comprehensive development agreement, then we would also be able to support that as well in terms of identifying that project and placing it into legislation for the region. So those are the 5 priorities, and obviously the legislative session is a very fluid process, and you'll recall during the last legislative session that there will be periodic updates to you all, and if we need to revise or amend or delete or add to this list, we can certainly do that. The point of this is really to identify from the Regional Mobility Authority here in El Paso what our priorities are.
Real quickly, Raymond, besides the TERS, which Pickett is going to carry for us, who else is going to carry the rest of this legislation? You know?
Well, a lot of, like, for example, number 5, there is no legislation. That's really dependent upon the delegation here in El Paso to identify those projects, so that would be El Paso as well. Toll enforcement remedies, those will likely be carried by the delegation out of either Dallas or Houston, because those are the folks that are having the most issues with habitual violators. In fact, North Texas Tollway Authority, and I'll send it to you, it's actually very interesting. They've got a list of the top, I think it's the top 100 violators, and there's millions of dollars in that list. So they're looking to deal with that. So I'm assuming that it'll be NTTA that will be driving that one. The revolving fund, that one, I believe that, if I remember correctly, Larry Phillips out of the House carried a bill last session, and he will likely do the same, and we would be interested in supporting that this session. Transportation reinvestment zones, as you mentioned, would likely be Representative Pickett. And increased transportation funding, I have no idea where that one would come from. But we would clearly be supportive of that.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Okay. Do you need a motion to?
Yes, sir. Motion to approve the resolution.
Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Moved. Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Same sign, done. Carries. All right. One more, Raymond. Discussion and action on the Executive Director's report. Who do we turn to on this one?
I'll handle these as well. These are simply very, very brief updates. The Americas Interchange Landscaping Plan, as we've discussed in prior meetings, the Americas Interchange project, actually the general engineering consultant for us is developing a landscaping plan, and I hope to have those for you today. They're actually being rendered as we speak. They've developed a couple of concepts, and I want to show those to you all. They've got videos that are actually being, as I mentioned, rendered right now. Unfortunately, we don't have them ready for you, but I'll share those with you as soon as we have them. And also, we have shared some initial concepts with TxDOT, and as we develop those, obviously, we'll keep you informed and obviously ask for your input on those. Item B is an update on the I-10 Corridor Aesthetic Improvement Project. This one, as you'll recall, we have a project within the Comprehensive Mobility Plan where we're looking to improve portions of I-10. The main corridor, or the main interchange that we're focusing on currently is the Airway Interchange. The artist, and to step back for a bit, the agreement on that one was that the RMA would provide the general engineering consultant, the city would provide the artist, and together that team would develop the aesthetic improvements, obviously in collaboration with TxDOT. The artist is developing some concepts for that now, working with our engineers, and we are looking to have a public meeting on November 8th. So I'd ask you to block your calendars on November 8th, the evening of, where we will actually have the artist develop a public meeting, and it'll follow the concepts that TxDOT utilizes in terms of public meetings, where you would have various stations built into a room, and the public can come in and walk from station to station. Each station would focus on a different aspect of the concept that she's developing. By way of example, one will deal with the colors that she envisions that the improvements would have. One would deal with the local artist that we've engaged for this particular project, what he's done and what he envisions for this. Others would deal with the walkability aspects of this particular project that they're looking to develop under the I-10 interchange with Airway and that sort of thing. So
Raymond,
that's, yes, ma'am.
How is that different from what's already been proposed and discussed for the Airways?
What's been
ideas are already out there, and the specific colors and the metal and.
Well, what you're referring
Landscaping.
what you're referring to is actually the conceptual design plan that it's been referred to as the master plan. That master plan was really the point of that master plan was to identify the corridor, what's there now, and what the concepts could be for the future. What we're talking about on November 8th is actually zeroing in on Airway and saying this is what the artist envisions for that corridor. So, like for example, when you flip to the Airway project within the master plan, you'll see that she envisions some sort of grading along the I-10 corridor, some sort of lighting, some sort of masting, and that sort of thing. But what you'll see on November 8th is taking that conceptual, and really part of the value of this meeting is to show the conceptual design plan, the master plan, as step one, and her evolution to get to what she's proposing, what she's really developing for the Airway interchange. So it's the evolution from the master plan to the actual vision that she sees for Airway. So that's November 8th. No action is required on that item.
And Raymond, we're working with Representative Acosta, so we don't have the issues.
Absolutely. And that's why this is particularly important that we have this public meeting. I think one of the issues that arose with Representative Acosta in particular was that the artist for that particular project basically came and presented to council and said, this is what's happening. Instead of that, we're taking a step back and saying, this is what the artist is looking at, and more importantly, soliciting input from not only the public, but the elected officials as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question on the item number 12B. We talked about this a little bit, Raymond. Is there a possibility that perhaps the high school arts teachers and maybe the UTEP arts instructors can be notified so that those students in art can get a feel as to something that's going on and maybe learn something, maybe can communicate?
Absolutely.
Just a matter of giving them the information.
Definitely, and that's right. You mentioned that in our meeting the other day, and I think it's a great idea. Part of our outreach will include not only reaching out to TxDOT and all of their contacts, the City of El Paso and all of their contacts, but the RMA and all of its contacts. Included and explicitly in there will be your recommendation that we reach out to the art teachers of the city. Definitely. And lastly, the chairman of the Transportation Commission here in Texas has reached out recently to the regional mobility authorities throughout the state, and they've asked each of us to present a 10-minute presentation on what we are involved in, where we're headed, where we've been, where we've headed, sort of a thing, at the October Transportation Commission meeting. So we're developing a PowerPoint for that, and the chairman, McLaughlin, will actually make that presentation to TxDOT at the October meeting. So I thought I'd let you know of that. And we'll share that PowerPoint with you.
TxDOT in Austin.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes, ma'am. So subject to your questions, that's all I have for you today.
Just going back to the aesthetic project, since downtown now has, and obviously this focus with the baseball stadium going in, will that mean that we can also do the aesthetic improvement along the corridor here, since downtown was kind of put off?
Well,
can it come back in line now, since we have this?
I would mention, though, that the actual downtown area was placed as a second priority. So if you recall, the way that the city council actually voted to prioritize the projects for the $10 million was that Airway would go first, and then whatever funds are left would be focused on downtown. And in the downtown area, they talked about the crossings and also the rail yard, the old lights that were run on the rail yard. So the answer is absolutely yes. The downtown area will get some sort of improvement after the Airway project does.
Right, but there was no sense of urgency, and now it seems like a perfect time to be part of the planning.
True.
So that's the only reason I bring it up.
Yeah, we're at the right point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Anything else for the good of the cause? I think that's all the agenda items we have. To hear a motion to adjourn. Second.
Second.
Questions? Yay?
Hey.
Opposed? No. Good deal. Bye.
Okay, we'll see you.